Behind Steve Harvey's decades of comedy, television success, and public advice is a complicated family story built across 3 marriages, 7 children, second chances, and one blended household that eventually learned how to see itself as a single family.
Marjorie Harvey, Steve Harvey's wife.
The woman at the center of Steve Harvey's present-day family is Marjorie Harvey. They first met in 1990 at a comedy club in Memphis where Steve was performing stand-up. Marjorie arrived late and took a seat near the front. Steve became so distracted that he stopped speaking, stared at her, and finally told the audience that he did not know who she was, but he was going to marry her one day. The prediction was memorable, but the timing was wrong. Steve and Marjorie dated briefly before he disappeared from her life. He later explained that he was struggling financially and did not feel capable of offering the stability he believed a serious relationship required. They went in different directions, married other people, and raised children. More than a decade passed before Steve became single again in 2005. According to him, his bodyguard remembered how happy he had been with Marjorie and encouraged him to call her before repeating old mistakes. Their reunion felt easier than their first attempt. Marjorie later described Steve's return as effortless, while Steve said the second chance felt like being reborn. They married on June 25, 2007, 17 years after their first meeting. Steve had 4 children from his previous marriages, twins Brandi and Karli, and sons Broderick Jr. and Wynton. Marjorie had 3 children, Morgan, Jason, and Lori. Steve legally adopted all 3 after the wedding, creating a family of 7 children. The legal paperwork was simpler than the emotional work. The children entered the new household with different memories, loyalties, and experiences of divorce. Marjorie acknowledged that people in blended families often arrive carrying hurt. Her rule was that nobody would be treated as an outsider. Every child would remain connected to both parents, and the disappointments of the past would not be allowed to destroy what the new family could become. Over time, she said, she and Steve became mom and dad to everybody. Marjorie also developed a public identity through fashion. In 2014, she launched The Lady Loves Couture, a fashion and lifestyle platform, and she helped influence Steve's transition from the oversized suits of his early career to a sharper, more modern style. Together, they became familiar faces at fashion shows and red carpets. Her most lasting work, however, may be connected to philanthropy. Steve and Marjorie established the Steve and Marjorie Harvey Foundation in 2010 to provide mentoring, education, and leadership opportunities for young people. Marjorie has been especially involved with Girls Who Rule the World, a program intended to help teenage girls develop confidence, strengthen their education, and imagine larger futures for themselves. The wider foundation also runs mentoring programs designed to teach young people communication, personal responsibility, educational planning, and leadership. Steve describes Marjorie as the person who brought calm and structure into his life. After his mistaken announcement at the 2015 Miss Universe competition, she praised him for returning to the stage and accepting responsibility. Both have also publicly rejected unsupported rumors about their marriage. In 2023, when online claims of infidelity and divorce spread widely, Steve stated that their marriage was fine, while Marjorie described the allegations as lies. Their relationship is not presented as perfect. It is a marriage built after previous marriages failed, children had been hurt, and both adults had learned difficult lessons. What makes Marjorie central to Steve's story is not simply that she became his third wife. She helped turn 7 children from different homes into one family, built charitable work beside him, and became the person he credits with changing the way he lived once the cameras were turned off.
Brandi Harvey, his eldest twin daughter, entered Steve's life in August 1982, when she and her twin sister Karli were born during his first marriage to Marjorie Harvey. At the time, Steve was not a television star. He was working as an insurance salesman and trying to provide for a young family. Soon afterward, he entered a stand-up comedy competition, won a small cash prize, and decided to pursue comedy seriously. That decision eventually made the Harvey name famous, but it came at a personal cost. Steve spent years traveling and struggling financially. His marriage to Marcia ended in 1994, and his relationship with the twins became strained. He has admitted that they did not receive the consistent presence they deserved. Years later, Steve recalled his daughters explaining that they had not understood his absence when they were young, but eventually recognized that his work had reached people far beyond their household.
Their willingness to consider the larger story did not erase the lost time, but it helped create a path toward reconciliation. Brandi's relationship with her father therefore represents one of the more honest parts of the Harvey family narrative. Professional success can improve a family's material life while still leaving emotional debts that must eventually be acknowledged. As an adult, Brandi chose a career centered on health, purpose, and personal transformation rather than entertainment. She worked as a teacher, became a personal trainer, and tested her discipline through competitive bodybuilding. Brandi placed second in a national physique committee competition. However, she later emphasized that the more important reward came from the preparation, structure, and self-knowledge required to reach the stage. She went on to create Beyond Her, a wellness platform aimed especially at women who want to improve their physical, mental, and spiritual lives.
Through the organization, Brandi presents health as something larger than appearance. Exercise, nutrition, and self-care are connected to confidence, purpose, and the ability to take responsibility for one's future. Her public work has also included writing, speaking, and hosting conversations about personal development. Brandi also served in a leadership role with the Steve and Marjorie Harvey Foundation, connecting her experience in education, wellness, and nonprofit work with programs supporting young people and families. That role placed her inside an organization carrying her father's name, but her contribution was based on experience she had developed independently. She was not appearing simply as Steve Harvey's daughter. She was helping shape projects connected to education, mentoring, and community health. Brandi is relatively private about romantic relationships and family life. Her public identity is built around discipline, emotional healing, and moving beyond inherited limitations rather than celebrity access. That makes her different from the image some people may expect from the daughter of a wealthy television host. Her message is not that a famous surname eliminates struggle. It is that each person remains responsible for examining what is happening inside their own mind and body. Steve often says that legacy is one of the reasons he continues working. Brandi demonstrates that legacy does not require copying a parent's profession. She did not become a comedian or game show host. Instead, she took some of the most difficult parts of her own experience, absence, reconciliation, pressure, and the need to rebuild, and transformed them into a message about becoming healthier from the inside out. As one of the oldest children, Brandi remembers Steve before fame, Marjorie, and the blended household. She has watched the family become a public dynasty, yet her work argues that real change begins privately before it can be displayed publicly. Karli Harvey Raymond. His twin daughter was born alongside Brandi in August 1982, making the sisters Steve's first children and the two people who knew him before audiences did. Their early childhood coincided with the most uncertain stage of his career, when comedy was not yet a dependable profession and the family could not know whether his risk would ever produce security. Like Brandi, Karli lived through the consequences of Steve's decision to leave stable employment and spend years pursuing stand-up. After her parents divorced, she grew up with the complicated experience of seeing her father become increasingly recognizable to strangers while remaining less present in her everyday life. The later rebuilding of their relationship became especially visible when Karli prepared to marry. Karli studied at Ohio State University and became an entrepreneur, host, editor, and mentor. She has spoken to women about confidence and style while combining communication, business, and community work. She has also been involved in mentoring young women and encouraging them to develop their own voices rather than defining themselves through famous relatives. In 2015, Karli married entrepreneur and motivational speaker Benjamin Raymond. Before the wedding, the couple appeared on Steve's talk show, where the usually confident host became emotional about giving his daughter away. He warned Benjamin that caring for Karli was a responsibility he would take personally. The moment was humorous enough for television, but it also carried greater emotional weight because Steve knew that he had missed important periods of his daughter's childhood. Walking Karli down the aisle became a visible symbol of reconciliation. Steve could not return to the years when she was young, but he could be present for the family she was creating as an adult. The wedding joined Karli to a partner whose work also centered on motivation, leadership, and personal development, interests that fitted naturally with the wider Harvey family's emphasis on encouraging others. In June 2016, Karli and Benjamin welcomed their son, Benjamin Troy Raymond II. His arrival made Steve and Marjorie grandparents and introduced another generation into the family. Karli and her husband designed the baby's nursery with a blessing tree from their wedding, preserving written messages from friends and relatives so their son would grow up surrounded by encouragement. Steve contributed in his own unmistakable way by making sure the room included one of his favorite quotations and a copy of his book about success. Motherhood allowed Karli to speak not only as Steve Harvey's daughter, but as a woman building her own marriage, career, and household. Steve was no longer simply repairing the past with her. He was being invited into the life of her child.
Becoming a grandfather gave him opportunities to show the kind of consistent presence that had been more difficult during Karli's early years. Karli and Brandi are twins, but their adult identities have not been interchangeable. Brandi's work has concentrated strongly on wellness and inner transformation, while Karli has leaned into hosting, entrepreneurship, confidence, and family-centered communication. Their bond remains important, yet each has created a separate voice and a different relationship with the public. Karli's story is ultimately about presence. Her childhood included the absence created by her father's ambition, but her adult milestones gave them opportunities to create different memories. The wedding, the birth of her son, and her work as a mentor show a woman who did not allow the most difficult parts of her family history to become the only parts that defined her. Broderick Harvey Jr., his eldest son, was born in Cleveland in April 1991, the third child of Steve and Marjorie Harvey. He was given Steve's legal first name, Broderick, creating a connection between father and son before either could know how complicated their relationship would become. When Steve and Marcia divorced in 1994, Broderick remained in Ohio with his mother and twin sisters. Steve's career was beginning to grow, but his son did not experience him as a full-time father. During a candid appearance on Steve's talk show in 2019, Broderick said he did not truly have his father in his daily life until he was 16. Steve did not attempt to turn that admission into a simple, inspirational story. He acknowledged regret and said he had spent much of his life trying to make up for mistakes he had made as a young man. The exchange revealed a different side of the entertainer who frequently gives confident advice to other people.
In front of his son, Steve had to accept that professional success could not excuse every personal absence. Moving into his father's world as a teenager required Broderick to adjust to new rules, expectations, and siblings, while getting to know a man millions of viewers already believed they understood. Their relationship developed later than most father-son bonds, after both were old enough to recognize what had been missed. Broderick eventually explored business, fashion, photography, and creative work rather than following Steve directly into comedy. One of his most public projects was Steps by Stevens, a shoe company created with a charitable promise. For every pair sold, meals would be donated to a child in need. When Steve featured the business on his show, he explained that the most important principles he wanted all his children to learn were hard work and giving back. The company mattered because it connected profit with responsibility. Broderick was not simply placing a famous surname on a product. The project was designed so that every purchase could help provide food for somebody else. That idea reflected the philanthropic culture Steve and Marjorie were building through their foundation, while allowing Broderick to express it through his own entrepreneurial interests. Broderick maintains a more private public life, appearing at family events without turning every relationship or career move into entertainment coverage. That makes his candid conversation with Steve about their past especially significant. It offered one of the few occasions when viewers could hear him speak directly about the difference between having a famous father and actually living with that father every day. Their story does not suggest that one television conversation repaired everything. A father missing much of a son's childhood cannot correct that loss through success, money, or a public apology. What the moment showed was a willingness to name the problem, rather than pretending that the Harvey family had always been perfectly united. As Steve's eldest son and namesake, Broderick carries both the advantages and the expectations attached to his father's identity. Yet sharing a name does not require sharing the same career or personality. Broderick has created a quieter lane around creative business, family participation, and charitable ideas. For Steve, Broderick represents one of fatherhood's hardest lessons. Providing financially is not the same as being present. For Broderick, adulthood created the opportunity to know his father beyond the absence of childhood and to decide which parts of the Harvey legacy he wanted to continue on his own terms. Wynton Harvey, his youngest biological child, was born on July 18, 1997, during Steve's second marriage to Mary Shackelford. His childhood unfolded while his father's career was already much more established than it had been when Brandi, Karli, and Broderick were born. Steve had television success and public recognition, but family stability was still not guaranteed. Steve and Mary divorced in 2005 after 9 years of marriage. The separation became contentious and was discussed publicly, placing Wynton inside a conflict he had not created. Steve later stated that he received primary custody when Wynton was 13 and that his son chose to live with him. Rather than allowing the adults' dispute to define Wynton's life, he gradually developed an identity connected to visual art. By then, Steve had married Marjorie, and Wynton became part of the blended household. Close in age to Lori, he spent important teenage years growing up alongside siblings Steve had adopted.
He therefore occupied a distinctive position. Biologically connected to Steve, but also raised during the period when the entire family was learning how to treat blood relatives and adopted children as equals. Wynton found his own language through photography. He has said that his interest began on his 11th birthday, when he downloaded a free trial of Adobe Lightroom and started experimenting with images. He was fascinated not only by taking photographs, but by changing them, adding his own style, and discovering how editing could transform an ordinary picture. His mother recognized that interest and bought him his first camera. What began as childhood curiosity developed into serious study. Wynton attended the Savannah College of Art and Design, where he studied photography and continued building a professional portfolio. In a student interview, he described the early surprise of realizing that other people might actually connect with the images he created. Photography placed Wynton near celebrity culture without requiring him to become the subject. While his father commands attention in front of cameras, Wynton works behind the lens, observing details and deciding how a person or scene should be seen. That contrast helps explain his place within the family. He participates in public holidays, trips and family events, but his professional identity depends more on authorship than inherited fame. He can benefit from access to remarkable people and locations, yet the final photograph must still succeed through composition, timing, light, and creative judgment. By Wynton's teenage years, Steve had already experienced divorce, distance from older children, and the consequences of placing career before family. That history gave him a clearer understanding of what could be lost. It did not automatically make Steve a perfect father, but it meant he was raising Wynton with knowledge he did not possess when the twins were born. Wynton represents the artistic side of the Harvey children. While his siblings moved toward wellness, hosting, cooking, fashion, or beauty, he built his world around images. His story shows how a child can emerge from a very public family conflict without allowing that conflict to become his entire public identity. Steve's audiences may first know Wynton as one of the 7 Harvey children, but his goal has been to make people notice the work rather than only the surname behind it. In a family filled with powerful voices, he found a way to communicate through what he chooses to place inside the frame. Morgan Hawthorne, his adopted daughter, was born on May 14, 1985, and is Marjorie Harvey's oldest child. Marjorie has written that she was only 19 when she became pregnant with Morgan, frightened, inexperienced, and determined to become the mother her daughter needed. Morgan was already an adult when Steve and Marjorie married in 2007. Steve legally adopted her, Jason and Lori, and all 3 took the Harvey surname. For Morgan, adoption was not about Steve raising her from early childhood. It was a formal declaration that the new family included adult children as fully as the younger ones. Her strongest professional interest developed in the kitchen. Morgan attended the Culinary Institute of America and graduated in 2011 with a degree in baking and pastry. She then worked with bakeries and special events companies, building practical experience before turning her knowledge into a public brand. Morgan created I Need Some Mo as a place to share approachable recipes, entertaining advice, and ideas for people who wanted impressive results without making food feel intimidating. Her work included cooking classes, online videos, and appearances on Steve's television show. She also wrote Party Heart, an ebook containing recipes and ideas designed for celebrations. Food gave Morgan a distinctive role inside a family known for entertainment and fashion. Meals mark birthdays, holidays, and reunions, making her work especially suited to a household learning how to gather different people around the same table. Cooking allowed her to turn hospitality into both a profession and a practical contribution to family life. In October 2013, Morgan married Kareem Hawthorne, also known professionally as DJ Bruckup. They had met during college and developed their relationship after graduation. Their first daughter, Elle Monroe, was born in March 2015, and their second daughter, Marjorie Jean, arrived in September 2020. Becoming a mother gave Morgan another connection to Marjorie. Her own childhood had begun when Marjorie was a very young parent trying to understand motherhood in real time. Decades later, Marjorie could watch Morgan raise daughters with the benefit of professional experience, family support, and a more stable foundation. Morgan's children also helped transform Steve from the father of a blended family into the grandfather of an expanding one. Steve often jokes about grandchildren returning to his house with the adult children he once expected to leave, while Marjorie openly enjoys being a grandmother. Behind the jokes, the grandchildren provide evidence that the blended family has continued into another generation. Morgan's identity is quieter than Lori's.
She has largely built her audience through useful expertise, recipes, entertaining ideas, and glimpses of family life, rather than celebrity news. People may initially discover her because of the Harvey name, but her public work gives them a reason to remain interested that has little to do with Steve's television career. Her story also explains what Steve and Marjorie meant when they said nobody would be excluded. Morgan did not stop being Marjorie's daughter, or lose the history that existed before Steve. Adoption added another relationship. She became Steve's daughter while remaining a woman with her own profession, marriage, children, and memories. In the Harvey family, Morgan represents hospitality, the practical work of creating spaces where people can gather. That may appear less dramatic than television success, but for a family assembled from several earlier households, the ability to bring people together is one of the most valuable contributions anyone could make.
Jason Harvey, his adopted son, was born in August 1991 and is Marjorie's only son. Like Morgan and Lori, he became Steve's legal child after Steve and Marjorie married in 2007. The adoption gave Steve another son close in age to Broderick, while Jason entered a household that already contained several adult and teenage siblings. Blending the children required more than family photographs. Jason had his own history with Marjorie, while Steve's biological children had experienced marriages, divorce, and absence. Marjorie created a rule of inclusion, but trust still had to grow over time. Jason and the other children needed to learn that accepting new siblings did not require them to erase the families they had known before. Jason eventually created a family of his own. In August 2013, he married model Amanda Hill. Their daughter Rose was born in June 2014, followed by sons Noah Ellington in 2015 and Ezra Nehemiah in 2016. Their younger daughter, Joey Iris, arrived in 2020. With 4 children, Jason became the parent responsible for the largest group of Steve and Marjorie's grandchildren. Fatherhood placed Jason in a role Steve had struggled with during his younger years. Steve has spoken openly about missing time with his first children while attempting to establish his career. Jason could observe both the success of his adoptive father and the regrets attached to it, then decide how to balance professional ambition with presence in his own household. Professionally, Jason moved into fashion and creative direction. He founded Worldly, an Atlanta-based creative house designed not only to produce clothing, but to give designers of color access to resources, production support, and professional opportunities. His goal was to allow talented people to concentrate on designing without being blocked by the costs and infrastructure they could not yet provide for themselves.
Jason explained that Black and brown designers often possess creativity but lack the support necessary to scale their work. Worldly attempted to become that support system. Designers were asked to bring their skills and time, while the company helped provide the wider structure needed to create and present a collection. The creative house's debut collaboration, Eden on Hush, combines streetwear, theatrical design, and more traditional fashion influences. The mission connects Jason to Marjorie's love of fashion and the family's interest in mentoring. He treats clothing as art while also trying to create professional space for people who might otherwise remain excluded. His work combines the personal style associated with Marjorie and the opportunity-building philosophy behind the family foundation. Jason is sometimes introduced as Steve Harvey's stepson, but the family uses the language of father and son. Adoption made the blended family philosophy concrete. Jason became one of the 7 children whose lives Steve calls his legacy. The relationship was not presented as secondary simply because it did not begin through biology. Jason's public profile is also strongly connected to Amanda and their children. Family photographs show a man whose creative ambitions exist beside the daily responsibility of raising 4 young people. His children are a large part of the reason the Harvey family now stretches across several homes and generations. Among the 7 siblings, Jason represents the idea that creativity should build more than personal recognition. His fashion work is intended to produce a platform wide enough for other designers to stand on. That approach reflects a family lesson repeatedly expressed by Steve. Success matters most when it creates opportunities that do not end with the person who first achieved it.
Marjorie Harvey, his youngest daughter, was born on January 13, 1997, and is Marjorie's youngest child. Steve legally adopted her after marrying Marjorie in 2007, and she grew up calling him her father rather than treating their relationship as a technical detail. Before fashion and celebrity headlines, Lori's ambition was athletic. She began competing in horseback riding and show jumping at 14 and hoped to reach the Olympic level. At 17, she won the Illinois Hunter-Jumper Association's Children's Medal Final, which Steve proudly celebrated on television. A serious back injury at 18 ended that path and forced her to imagine a future without the dream that had shaped her adolescence. Her parents decided that the physical risks were too great for her to continue competing. The loss was painful, but it pushed Lori toward interests she had already begun developing around Marjorie. As a child, Lori watched Marjorie prepare for events and attempted to recreate professional makeup looks at home. She entered modeling in 2015 and worked with brands including Dolce & Gabbana, Michael Kors, Valentino, Burberry, and Pat McGrath Labs. At around 5'3", she did not match the traditional runway mold and saw that difference as a chance to widen the image of who could succeed in fashion. In 2021, Lori collaborated with Naked Wardrobe on a size-inclusive collection and launched SKN by LH, inspired by her rosacea, sensitive skin, and the heavy makeup used during modeling jobs. She wanted a simplified routine for people facing similar problems, and the first collection sold out within days. Her business ambitions expanded into swimwear with Yevra, Harvey spelled backward. Lori has emphasized that she handles creative direction, design, product development, and campaign decisions rather than merely lending her face to products. The pressure she experienced to fit particular beauty and body standards also influenced her desire to make her brands more inclusive. Lori has received more attention for her romantic life than any of her siblings. Her relationships have involved public figures, and appearances, vacations, and breakups have repeatedly generated commentary. Steve has responded as both a comedian and a protective father, joking about boyfriends while insisting that fame or physical appearance matters less than how somebody treats his daughter. He has also recognized the unfairness of Lori making normal young adult decisions in public. Steve explained that most people are able to make mistakes privately, while Lori's choices are photographed and discussed internationally. His approach has been to offer advice without pretending he can control an adult daughter. After one highly publicized breakup, he made his position clear. He supported Lori. Lori is not Steve's biological daughter, but he adopted her, helped raise her, and speaks about her with the same pride and concern he shows toward the other children. She has said that Steve and Marjorie protected their children from excessive attention while they were young, and allowed them to decide for themselves whether they wanted careers in public life. Her career moved beyond modeling into entrepreneurship and acting. After losing the equestrian future she expected, she reinvented herself. Horses taught discipline, fashion gave visibility, and beauty businesses allowed her to become a founder rather than only a face. Her ability to change direction is one of the most important parts of her story. As the most publicly watched of Steve's children, Lori carries both privilege and pressure. The Harvey name opens doors, but it also encourages strangers to treat her relationships, appearance, and business decisions as shared property. Her challenge has been to use that access without allowing attention to define her entire identity. Together, Marjorie and the 7 children reveal the cost of Steve's ambition, the work of reconciliation, and the creation of a blended family. Steve may be the famous name at the center, but they show what his success demanded, what it failed to protect, and what the entire Harvey family eventually learned to rebuild.